My husband slammed his fist on the table, his voice sharp as a blade. "It's time to cash in your inheritance, Grace. You owe it to this family." My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the suffocating injustice of being treated like a bank account, not a wife. For years, Daniel had controlled the money, the decisions, even my freedom, while his mother cheered him on. But tonight, something shifted inside me. As his words echoed, I reached for my phone. With one number, I could summon the only person he feared most. And I pressed call. Daniel's words still echoed in my mind long after the phone call had ended. His voice carried the kind of certainty that stripped me of my humanity, as though I were no more than a vault waiting to be unlocked. I wanted to scream at him, to fight back, but instead, I swallowed my anger like I had done so many times before. Out there, in front of his colleagues, he was charming, charismatic Daniel, the man everyone admired, envied even. But once the doors closed behind us, I saw a different man. A man who wrapped his fists around control so tightly that I could hardly breathe. At first, it had been subtle. He would slide his arm around my shoulders at parties, whispering, "Don't overdo the drinks, sweetheart. You know how it looks." The words were coded with care, but underneath was command. When I wanted to visit my sister, he'd sigh, "Grace, I just think you're better off spending time here with me. We don't see each other enough." I used to believe him. I thought it was love, until I realized it was a slow erasure of my world. His favorite disguise was financial concern. "I just want us to save more," he would say, taking over my bank account, "so you don't have to worry about a thing." In reality, he was the one who had stripped away my freedom, each statement a chain linking me tighter to him. I told myself it was normal for husbands to handle money, that maybe I was too sensitive. But late at night, staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of something being stolen. One evening, as I walked past his study, the glow of his laptop caught my eye. He had left it open, something he rarely did. My pulse quickened as I glanced at the screen. An email, a name I didn't recognize, and beneath it, words that blurred as I tried to read too quickly. My stomach twisted. I closed the laptop before my mind could form the full thought. Was I imagining things again? The rational part of me said yes, but the knot in my chest whispered no. I couldn't let it go. So, I began writing things down, little phrases, shifts in his tone, moments when he made me feel small. It was part diary, part evidence, though at the time I didn't dare call it that. Some nights I flipped back through the pages and doubted myself. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am too emotional. But still, I wrote, because some instinct told me these moments mattered. Then came the night that shattered any illusion left. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch, his phone lying on the armrest. My hands shook as I reached for it, every nerve screaming that I shouldn't, that it was wrong, but I opened the messages and there it was, a conversation with his mother. "Don't worry, I'll make her sign. The inheritance will soon be ours." The words pierced me like knives. Not hers, not Grace's, but ours. My vision blurred. My own husband conspiring with his mother to take what was mine by birth. I felt betrayed on a level that language could not hold. All the moments of manipulation, the veiled insults, the stolen autonomy, it all connected into one chilling truth. He had never seen me as his wife. I was only ever an obstacle standing between him and the fortune he craved. I stumbled back, pressing my hand against my mouth to silence the sobs clawing their way out. It felt as though the ground beneath me had collapsed. I wanted to hate him, to pack my bags and run that very night. But beneath the anguish was a strange, cold relief. Finally, my intuition had been right. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't oversensitive. He was exactly what I feared. The next morning, Daniel seemed different, softer, almost attentive. He brought me coffee in bed, kissed my forehead, asked about my work. By the afternoon, flowers arrived at the house. Lilies, my favorite. That evening, he suggested dinner at the little French bistro we hadn't visited in years. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if maybe the message had been out of context, maybe he regretted it. But as I watched him laugh across the table, his hand brushing mine, the dissonance grew louder. This was not love. This was performance. He had seen the panic in my eyes when I glanced at his phone. He knew. And instead of remorse, he chose deception. The realization turned my wine bitter in my mouth. Daniel smiled, his charm as dazzling as ever, but I saw the mask now. I saw the predator beneath it. And as the candlelight flickered across his face, I forced myself to smile back. Because if this was the game he wanted to play, then I would learn the rules. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "What if he already knows you're playing too?" The night after that dinner, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the taste of deception still heavy on my tongue. Daniel's laughter replayed in my mind, too polished, too deliberate. I knew then that if I stayed in the haze of confusion, I would lose myself completely. I needed clarity. I needed proof. The next morning, I slipped a small recorder into my purse. It was light, almost invisible, but it felt like I was carrying a bomb. Every conversation became an opportunity. Every word Daniel spoke was sharpened with meaning. When he told me, "Grace, you really should let me handle your account. You're not good with numbers," my fingers brushed against the recorder's button. My heart hammered as the red light blinked. He didn't notice, too busy savoring his own authority. But the danger was constant. One evening, while he paced the living room on a phone call, I crept closer, trying to catch every word. Suddenly, his voice stopped. I spun around, shoving my phone into my pocket. He was there, standing in the doorway, his eyes narrowing. My mind blanked. Instinct took over. I let the phone slip from my pocket, hitting the floor with a thud. "Clumsy me," I said with a nervous laugh. He smirked, shaking his head, and walked away. Only after he disappeared upstairs did I realize my knees were trembling so badly I could barely stand. Later that night, locked in the bathroom, I pressed play on the recorder. His voice came through, sharp and commanding. "She'll sign it. I'll make sure of it." My chest tightened. I sank onto the cold tiles, pressing a hand to my heart as if I could steady its frantic rhythm. Tears welled, not from fear alone, but from a question that stabbed deeper than any betrayal. Why am I still here? What did I do to deserve this prison disguised as love? For a moment, I hated myself more than I hated him, and then I wiped my eyes and whispered, "No, this ends with me." But survival required patience. So I collected more: photographs of hidden documents, screenshots of bank transfers. Each piece was a puzzle, forming the picture of a man who had never loved me, only coveted what I carried. Still, one truth haunted me. I didn't have enough. Not yet. I sought out a lawyer, a woman named Harper, whose calm presence steadied me. She listened, flipping through my meager stack of evidence. When she looked up, her eyes were steady but unflinching. "Grace, this is a start. But if we go to court now, he'll bury you. You need more." The words crushed me, but I nodded. More, always more. Walking home from Harper's office, I thought of the one person Daniel had never been able to outmaneuver, my aunt, Margaret. Once a formidable businesswoman, Margaret had clashed with Daniel in the past. I remembered the venom in his voice whenever her name surfaced. He loathed her. He feared her. The next day, I found myself at Margaret's doorstep. She greeted me with the same fierce eyes I remembered from childhood. I told her everything, my voice cracking as I revealed the betrayal, the evidence, the terror. When I finished, she leaned back, lips curving into something between pity and triumph. "I knew he'd try something like this," she said. "He's predictable, Grace. All men blinded by greed are. What he doesn't know is that I've been watching him longer than you realize." She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder thick with papers. Bank slips, emails, contracts with his signature scrawled at the bottom. I stared in disbelief. "You've been collecting?" She interrupted, her smile sharp. "Daniel borrowed money from me years ago. He thought he was clever, hiding it under shell companies. But I keep records, and if I speak, he loses everything." A strange mixture of relief and dread washed over me. I wasn't alone anymore. Yet, Something in her tone unsettled me. Margaret's eyes glittered not with compassion, but with calculation. She wanted to help, yes, but there was more. There was always more. As I tucked the folder into my bag, she leaned closer, her voice low. "You'll get your justice, Grace, but remember, nothing comes free in this world." Driving home, her words echoed in my head. Justice. Yes. But at what price? The recorder in my purse, the folder on the seat beside me, they were shields, weapons even. But they were also chains. With every step I took, I was walking deeper into a war I barely understood. That night, as Daniel slept peacefully beside me, I scrolled through Margaret's documents under the covers. My pulse quickened at each revelation. Offshore accounts, false invoices, debt hidden in plain sight. My husband was not just manipulative, he was reckless, and he was cornered, whether he knew it yet or not. I turned off the phone and lay in the dark, staring at his silhouette. The man who had once promised to cherish me now plotted with his mother to strip me of everything. And the woman who offered to save me might also be using me for her own revenge. I was trapped between two predators. And as the night stretched on, one thought refused to leave me. What if Margaret is not my savior, but simply another player in this game? Patience became my weapon. I wore it like a mask, stitched from polite smiles and rehearsed laughter. In public, I was the loyal wife, standing gracefully at Daniel's side during dinners and charity galas. I served drinks when his colleagues visited, nodded at his jokes, even when they cut too close to my dignity. Inside, however, a storm raged. Every word he spoke was a reminder of betrayal, every glance from him a reminder of the trap I was in. At home, Daniel's control pressed harder. When I suggested a trip to see my parents, he laughed. "Grace? Really? Do you think we have time for that nonsense? Stay focused on us." His voice was casual, but his eyes left no room for negotiation. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, forcing a smile. My hands folded neatly on my lap, but my thoughts burned. Soon, very soon, the truth will tear this house apart. The urge to scream often clawed its way up my throat. When he mocked me in front of friends, "Grace is too soft. She'd give away her last dollar if someone asked nicely." The laughter that followed felt like knives slicing through me. I wanted to stand, to expose him right there. But instead, I pressed my lips into a smile, fingers digging into my palms beneath the table. Every insult became another note in my secret journal, another stone in the foundation of his downfall. One crisp autumn afternoon, I wandered to the park. I sat on a bench beneath a tree whose leaves had turned gold and crimson. Across the path, a couple strolled hand in hand, their laughter easy, their movements natural. I watched them until my vision blurred. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. It wasn't envy. It was grief. Grief for the love I once thought I had, for the life I believed was mine. All I had ever wanted was something simple, genuine. Instead, I had married into a cage built of deceit. For a moment, I allowed myself to break, shoulders shaking, heart aching. Then I inhaled sharply, wiped my face, and stood. I had no luxury for despair. My role demanded composure. That evening, Daniel surprised me. He walked into the room with a small box in his hand, a smug smile playing at his lips. "For you," he said, opening it to reveal a necklace of white gold and sapphires. "Because I love you." He clasped it around my neck, his hands lingering on my shoulders as he kissed my cheek. The words caught in my throat. "Because I love you." Did he think a glittering trinket could erase his betrayal? Or was this another move in his game, a way to confuse me, to make me doubt the evidence I carried in my own hands? My smile was thin, brittle, but he didn't notice. As I looked at myself in the mirror, the necklace gleaming under the light, I asked silently, "Is this a gift or a shackle?" I began to study him more carefully, as if he were a subject under a microscope. I noted how his voice hardened whenever Margaret's name surfaced, how his jaw tightened when money was mentioned, how his laughter grew forced when anyone praised another man more than him. 3 weaknesses revealed themselves, clear and undeniable: his pride, his greed, and his fear of Margaret. Each time he slipped, I wrote it down. Each reaction, each flicker of emotion became a clue. I imagined scenarios. If he tried to strike first, how would I shield myself? If he spread lies about me, how could I disarm them before they took root? In the quiet of the night, I rehearsed responses, sharpened comebacks, planned counterattacks. I was no longer just surviving, I was preparing for war. But Daniel wasn't blind. He sensed the shift in me, though he couldn't name it. One evening, I caught a shadow outside our home, a figure lingering near the gate. The following days, I noticed strange cars parked across the street, men pretending to check their phones while their eyes flickered toward me. My skin prickled with awareness. Daniel had hired someone to watch me. The realization chilled me to my core. He didn't trust me, and he was right not to. But instead of fear, I felt something sharper: opportunity. If he thought surveillance would expose me, then perhaps I could use it to set a trap. I continued my routines, feigning ignorance. I smiled when he asked too casually about my errands, hugged him tightly when he returned home, even thanked him again for the necklace. All the while, I moved my pieces across the board, unseen. Still, at night, as I lay awake beside him, the danger pulsed like a heartbeat. Every breath he took seemed heavier, more ominous. He believed he was the hunter, but he didn't see the truth yet. I was no longer his prey. And as I watched the shadows shift outside my window, one question circled in my mind like a vulture. Who is really being watched here, me or him? The dining room glowed with the warm flicker of candles, but there was nothing warm about Daniel's eyes. He leaned forward, his knuckles pressed hard against the tablecloth, his voice edged with command. "It's time to cash in your inheritance, Grace. You owe it to this family." The words fell like a blade between us. For a long moment, I said nothing. My fork rested lightly in my hand, though I had no appetite left. His jaw was tight, his stare unwavering, as if daring me to refuse. My heart thudded in my chest, but my fingers moved with calm precision. I slid my hand into my purse, withdrew my phone, and pressed the number I had memorized. The silence stretched until the line clicked, and Margaret's voice broke through, sharp and deliberate. "Daniel, we need to talk." It was a simple sentence, yet it detonated like an explosion. The blood drained from his face, leaving him pale, his mouth parting in shock. He froze, his arrogance collapsing under the weight of a voice he had hoped never to hear again. For the first time in months, I allowed myself a smile. Small, steady, and filled with something he had never seen in me before: power. Was this victory, or merely the opening move in a much longer game? I wasn't sure yet, but the shift was undeniable. 2 days later, Margaret arrived at our home. She swept into the dining room with the commanding presence of a general entering enemy territory. Daniel attempted civility, his voice dripping with false warmth. "Margaret, this is unexpected." "Not unexpected at all," she countered, setting a leather briefcase on the table. She unlatched it and spread its contents with a deliberate slowness. Documents slid across the polished wood. Bank statements, hidden loans, signed contracts. "You've been busy, Daniel," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Busy digging your own grave." His face hardened. "These don't mean anything. Fabrications." But I had prepared for this moment. My hands didn't shake as I pulled out my phone and pressed play. His voice filled the room, cruel and calculating. "Don't worry, I'll make her sign. The inheritance will soon be ours." The sound hit him like a strike. He surged from his chair, towering over me, his face red. "Grace, that's out of context. You don't understand." But Margaret cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Out of context? Don't insult my intelligence. I've kept my eyes on you longer than you know, and now the truth is staring you in the face." For the first time, Daniel faltered. His bravado cracked, replaced by something I hadn't expected: tears. His voice trembled as he sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. "Grace, please, it's not what you think. I was under pressure. My mother, she pushed me. I never wanted to hurt you." His words stabbed at the softest parts of me. For a moment, my resolve wavered. I stared at the man I had once loved, the man who had whispered vows into my ear. His shoulders shook, his voice broken. Was I wrong? Had I misunderstood everything? My throat tightened and my chest ached with doubt. I gripped the edge of the table, my nails digging into the wood. I wanted to believe him. I wanted desperately to believe there was some part of the man I married still left inside him. But as I searched his eyes, I saw not love, not remorse, only strategy. His tears were not truth. They were another manipulation. The room felt suffocating. I pressed a hand to my chest, struggling to breathe, caught between past affection and present betrayal. My vision blurred, and I blinked rapidly, forcing myself back into clarity. Margaret's voice sliced through my hesitation like a knife. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a single sheet of paper, old but damning. "Recognize this?" she asked, sliding it toward him. Daniel froze. His tears vanished. On the paper was his signature, bold and undeniable, a debt contract he had once signed with Margaret. Proof of his recklessness, proof of his lies, the mask shattered, his face twisted into rage, his fists clenching against the table. For a heartbeat, I thought he might strike her, or me. But he didn't move. He sat trapped, cornered by the weight of his own greed. I inhaled slowly, steadying my hands. Margaret leaned back, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You're finished, Daniel, and you know it." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see my husband. I saw the predator stripped of his claws, cornered and afraid. A part of me mourned, but another part, the stronger part, felt a quiet triumph. Yet deep inside, a question coiled like a serpent. Was this the end of his game, or just the beginning of mine? Daniel didn't stay broken for long. The man who had crumbled in front of Margaret returned with a vengeance. Within days, whispers began to circulate. At first, they were faint, like the rustle of leaves in a storm. Then they grew louder, sharper, until they reached me in the most brutal of ways. A colleague at the clinic pulled me aside, her expression torn between sympathy and suspicion. "Grace, is it true that you've been unstable? That you fabricated evidence against your husband?" The words sliced me open. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt the blood drain from my veins. Daniel had begun his counterattack. Soon, the narrative spread. His family called relatives, neighbors, anyone who would listen. His mother hissed venom into the phone. "She's after his money, always has been." Cousins repeated her lies until they became a chorus. Even strangers online joined in, parroting the same poisoned words. Manipulative, greedy, hysterical. The media caught hold of it like fire to dry grass. Articles appeared questioning my credibility. Headlines that painted me as a fragile wife inventing abuse for inheritance. Photographs of me at charity events surfaced, captioned with insinuations. Is this the face of a liar? Everywhere I turned, the walls closed in. And then came the blow I hadn't expected. A message from my old friend, Claire. "We need to talk." I met her at a cafe, desperate for some comfort, some reminder that not everyone believed Daniel's lies. But when I walked in, the look in her eyes wasn't sympathy, it was pity, edged with betrayal. "I'm sorry, Grace," she whispered, not meeting my gaze. "Daniel came to me. He needed help. I told him a few things. I thought maybe it would calm everything down." My stomach dropped. "You told him about Harper? About the recordings?" She nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. "I didn't mean harm. He's your husband, I thought. You thought wrong." My voice was ice. I stood, leaving her trembling in her seat. Inside, though, I felt my heart fracture. Daniel hadn't just attacked from the outside. He had wormed his way through the cracks in my life, turning people I trusted into weapons. That night, Harper sat across from me, her face grave. Grace, listen to me carefully. If you lose this case, if his lies take hold, you won't just lose the inheritance. You'll lose everything. Your reputation, your practice, your future. Are you prepared for that? Her words coiled around me like a noose. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My reflection in the window looked pale, fragile. Was I really prepared to gamble it all? But then Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. All men blinded by greed are predictable. She was right. Daniel was showing his hand too soon. If I held steady, I could turn every one of his attacks back on him. And so we began. We released the evidence in waves. First, the financial records, clean, undeniable, damning. The transfers, the offshore accounts, the forged signatures. Then came the emails, the ones where his words dripped with entitlement. She'll sign it. It belongs to us. The world began to shift. Doubt crept into the cracks of his carefully built facade. He lashed out, calling me delusional on television, painting me as a bitter wife who couldn't accept her place. But each time he opened his mouth, Margaret countered with another file, another document, another truth. His denials only highlighted his contradictions. For the first time, I stepped into the light myself. A journalist requested an interview, and I accepted. Sitting beneath the harsh studio lights, I told my story. Not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her dignity. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. I didn't beg for pity. I laid out the truth. When the segment aired, the response stunned me. Messages poured in from women who had lived their own silent battles, women thanking me for speaking aloud what they could not. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was standing for all of them. But Daniel fought harder. He screamed on live broadcasts, slammed his fist against podiums, swore that I was orchestrating a witch hunt. His rage bled through his mask, and the public began to see him as I always had. A man ruled by his greed, his pride, his fear. The final blow came quietly. Margaret, with a smile that held both triumph and vengeance, revealed the contract of debt Daniel had once signed. His family, the very people who had shouted loudest in his defense, went silent. Whispers turned to glares. His mother refused his calls. His cousins stepped back. One by one, they abandoned him, unwilling to drown in the same sinking ship. That evening, Harper called with the news. The court had frozen Daniel's accounts. He no longer had access to the fortune he craved. For all his posturing, all his lies, the empire he had built on manipulation was crumbling beneath his feet. I sat alone in my living room, the silence heavy. Victory should have felt sweet, but instead it felt unfinished, like a note left unresolved. I thought of his pale face when Margaret confronted him, of his tears that weren't real, of the rage that twisted his features when the evidence closed in. And then I remembered his last look at me, just before the freeze order came down, a smirk, faint but chilling. I shivered, clutching the recorder still in my hand. Had I truly won? Or was the final battle still waiting in the shadows? The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, the kind that pressed against your skin like static before a storm. Reporters filled the benches, their pens ready, their cameras eager. Friends and strangers alike leaned forward, waiting for the spectacle of an empire collapsing. Daniel entered with the swagger of a man who still believed he could bend the world to his will. His suit was immaculate, his smile sharp, but beneath the surface, his eyes betrayed the cracks. He scanned the room, found me sitting quietly beside Harper, and smirked as if he still owned me. The judge called the room to order, and the evidence began. Harper laid out the financial records, one after another. Screens displayed the offshore accounts, the hidden transfers, the forged signatures. The jury listened, stone-faced. Daniel tried to interject, object, deny. But his voice grew shrill, his words increasingly tangled. Then came the recordings. My hands trembled as the familiar voice filled the room. "Don't worry. I'll make her sign. The inheritance will soon be ours." Gasps rippled through the audience. I stared at the table in front of me, unable to meet his eyes. Witnesses followed, associates he had betrayed, employees he had cheated, even relatives who could no longer stomach his greed. Each testimony was another nail driven into the coffin of his defense. By the time Margaret stepped forward, her calm certainty sealed his fate. Daniel's bravado crumbled. He slumped in his chair, his fists limp at his sides. His eyes finally met mine, wide, desperate, no longer the gaze of a predator, but of a man cornered by the truth. When the judge asked if he had anything left to say, his voice cracked. "Grace, please. I didn't mean for it to be this way. His words broke into sobs. He begged for mercy, for forgiveness, for one more chance. I remained silent. My lips pressed together, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. For years, he had stolen my voice. Today, silence was louder than any reply I could have given. The verdict came swift and final. Guilty. Accounts frozen, reputation destroyed. I couldn't stop the tears that spilled then, not for him, but for myself. For the years I had lost in the prison of his control, for the bruises no one could see, for the love I had believed in that had turned to ash. My shoulders shook, and for once I didn't hide it. The courtroom blurred through the haze of my crying, but my sobs were not weakness. They were release. As I wept, Daniel bowed his head, his shoulders hunched. But when the judge's gavel struck, I caught it, the faint curl of his lips, a crooked, twisted smile. My blood ran cold. Even in defeat, even stripped bare, he found a way to unsettle me. The question burned in my chest. Was this truly the end? Or had he hidden one last card, waiting for its moment? The days that followed were quiet in comparison, though never truly peaceful. The headlines declared my victory, painting me not as a victim, but as a woman who had stood against corruption and survived. Patients returned to my clinic, friends I had thought lost reached out, and slowly, the pieces of my life began to knit back together. I threw myself into work, and it flourished. For the first time in years, I made choices without asking permission, spent money I had earned without fear of judgment. At night, I gathered with old friends, and laughter filled the spaces that had long been silent. I found myself smiling, not the brittle kind that hid pain, but genuine, unguarded smiles. And yet, the scars remained. When I walked past certain restaurants, memories struck like blows. When I heard the cadence of his voice on a television replay, my chest tightened. Healing was not the erasure of the past, it was learning to live with the marks it had left. Margaret visited sometimes. We shared coffee, silence, and the occasional sharp-edged laugh. "You're stronger now," she said once, her eyes softening in a way I had never seen. She was right. The woman who had once cowered under Daniel's commands was gone. In her place stood someone who had stared down ruin and chosen to rise. I thought of all the ways this could have ended, of the countless women who never found their escape. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a reminder that justice didn't always come swiftly, but it could come with patience, with cunning, with courage. One morning, I stood at the edge of the city, the sunrise washing the skyline in shades of gold. The world felt new, alive, filled with possibilities I had once believed were lost to me. I inhaled deeply, letting the light touch every scar, every shadow. But as I stepped forward into that dawn, I couldn't shake the lingering echo of his crooked smile. Was Daniel truly gone from my life, or merely lurking in the shadows, waiting? The future stretched before me, vast and uncertain. Yet for the first time in years it was mine.